You are Locked On Wolves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Let's go. T-Wolves. Jack put that final nail in the coffin. They take care of business in Game 5 in the backyard at Target Center. That place sounded like it was absolutely going to explode. Golden State, your season is over. Off to Cancun for you. 121, 121-110. That's your final. Never a doubt, Jack. Just like that, we're headed back to the Western Conference Finals one more time, baby. Back in the lab, back at it. Another T-Wolves Postcast episode right here on the Locked On Sports Minnesota Network. Your team every day. Again, Jack Borman with me as always. Please give him a follow if you haven't already. At JR Borman 13. Jack, just off the top here, they got the job done. They came out with some pep in their step, man. Love the edge they started this game out with. They were up 15 at halftime, kept that energy up the entire second half for the most part, right? And they marked their spot, right? They grabbed their chip, they grabbed their chair for the Western Conference Finals. Before we get into all that, though, this team's 8-2 in the playoffs, man. 8-2. No one had them even beating the Lakers, and now they're 8-2. Will this win be enough to finally get some respect of the national media and maybe some of the attention they actually deserve?
Yeah, I think they've slowly been gaining this respect. I think the way that they beat LeBron and Luka was certainly nothing to sneeze at. I think that, I think a lot of people picked the Wolves coming into this series, and then, the narrative obviously switched when Steph went down because of how good Steph looked in the first 10 or so minutes that he played in Game 1. But look, I mean, the Timberwolves have just kept the main thing for them, and that's just controlling what they can control and play really hard, and everything took care of itself. That's kind of what Chris Finch talked about pregame down the hall tonight, was just saying, hey, if we play hard and we, focus on the things we're supposed to focus on, then, things are going to take care of itself. And that's exactly what happened, man. The Wolves are now 4-0 in closeout games under Chris Finch. Tonight was their first one at home, so obviously a big one there. And for the first time in franchise history, the Wolves are going to the Western Conference Finals for a second year in a row. So, I mean, the vibes at Target Center were pretty great. You had Julius Randle shimmying and giving Buddy Hield the too small. You had, Ant smiling ear to ear. Dished out a career high, tying 12 assists, and looked super comfortable, just empowering everybody else, facing double teams. The GOAT, Red Panda, was in the house tonight.
I heard that.
Delivered a perfect performance, left the court to MVP chance. And yeah, it was just nice to see the Wolves overcoming some honestly really sloppy play at times. I mean, 53 of Golden State's 110 points either came off of second chance points or turnovers. And so that's 48% of their total scoring output. So I don't necessarily want that to get lost in the sauce, because they're going to have to be significantly better in both of those areas, no matter who they draw in the Western Conference Finals. And this is per Karthika Uthaya Kumar on Blue Sky, said that the Timberwolves have committed 20-plus turnovers for the third game in a row, the longest streak in the playoffs in 18 years. So that's obviously something that they're going to have to clean up. But hey, the final on the scoreboard has the Timberwolves out in front, and the Wolves are going back to the Western Conference Finals. And the most important thing about that, Luke, is that last year the Timberwolves really felt like they let the Nuggets off the hook. They went up 2-0. They won their first 6 games of the playoffs last year, then came home to Target Center and lost both of those games, and then was just in a dogfight from there on. Ended up winning Game 7 on the road in Denver, but they were gassed for that Western Conference Finals against Dallas, and every single Timberwolves player would tell you that they were gassed, and so many of them came into last summer with a renewed focus on conditioning and making sure that their bodies would hold up for this. And so the fact that the Wolves now will for sure get off Thursday, Friday, and Saturday before a potential Game 1 on Sunday. So that Game 1 will be Sunday if Oklahoma City closes the deal tomorrow night. But if Oklahoma City loses and this series goes 7 games, that Game 7 would be, I believe, on Sunday, either Saturday or Sunday. But Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals then wouldn't be until Tuesday. So it would be a huge rest opportunity for the Wolves. So I think no matter who you're rooting for the Wolves to face in the Western Conference Finals, you'd certainly want that to go 7, just so you can get some of that advantage that the Mavs enjoyed last season. So, but what a night at Target Center. It was a ton of fun. This crowd was juiced from the start, significantly louder than anything we heard from the crowd at Chase Center in games 3 and 4. So obviously a huge hat tip to a great crowd at Target Center tonight. And hopefully they are all walking out of here pretty happy with the Wolves back in the Western Conference Finals.
No doubt about that. A lot of good points. I do want to pick your brain a little bit more about this, just the extended rest time they could potentially get either way, whether OKC finishes the deal tomorrow night or that goes 7. But lots to get into on top of that. Series MVP, I'm going to ask you. Preview of the Western Conference Finals a little bit later on. But first, quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by Monarch Money. Monarch Money, take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, so Wolves take care of business tonight. They get the job done. I got to say, give the Warriors some credit, battling to the very end, trying to chip away, get this thing close. They just didn't have the manpower or the talent, though. They just ran out of gas, obviously, at the end. 121-110, that's your final. You already kind of touched on big picture here. Again, 8-2 in the playoffs versus 2 really good teams. Yes, we can get into no Steph Curry, obviously, for the Warriors. But best of all, I think you touched on it. Minimum 3 days to rest up before a possible game 1. At minimum. How huge is that at this juncture in the season? Because there are going to be some people here, Jack, who said they had too much time off. They ended up coming out that game 1 versus Golden State, and they went, 0 of 16, 0 of 17, something like that from 3, and they just looked kind of rusty. So is there a point or juncture where it's like, maybe this is too much rest here, and we should ideally be back on the court by now so we don't lose some rhythm, don't lose some confidence at a certain point? Or are you just all in, give me as many days of rest as possible at this point in a long gauntlet season?
No, I think you want as many days of rest as possible. I mean, look at the Nuggets and the Warriors, right? Both those teams played in grueling series in the last series, and ended up having to come into game 1 on the road in each of those series, and they both won each of those game 1s, but they just have progressively looked more and more out of gas as these games have gone on. So I think that's something that you've got to keep in mind as well. And the other thing for me with the rest is you just don't chance anything with injuries happening, right? I mean, the really unfortunate reality of the NBA playoffs is that while yes, it is certainly a test of who is the best team, there often is a lot of playoff success that is, pretty dependent upon some injury luck as well. I think, you can certainly point at, a few of the last 4 or 5 championships as, this team made their, or kind of got some injury luck and then took advantage of that on their way to the finals. And I think for the Wolves, again, they can't control that. They can't control people telling them, oh, you won this series because Steph Curry was hurt, or, oh, you only won the finals because Jason Tatum blew out his Achilles or something like that. So I don't think you ever want to leave it to chance with the rust over rest type of situation. I think every single player would tell you that they'd rather be at home resting. And so especially for a guy like Julius Randle, who's got a sinus infection, said that after the last game. And we didn't catch that before we went live, but he did. And certainly probably not 100% again tonight, but played excellently. So hopefully a few days for him to, just kind of get his feet under him and feel a little bit better. And so these guys don't have to travel as much too, right? Because there's a very real chance that, if you end up going out winning game 6 in Golden State, that you'd have to do what the Warriors did on the heels of their last series, right? They went straight from Houston, winning game 7 to Minnesota for game 1. And the Wolves would probably have to go straight from San Francisco to potentially Oklahoma City for game 1 there. So I think, again, 100 times out of 100, you'd rather take the rest and just not leave anything up to chance with injuries or whatever the case may be.
And also, too, I'm thinking about this more from a physical aspect, Jack. The mental preparation that Coach Finch and his staff can prepare with the extra time as well. It's like Andy Reid for the Chiefs. He's like 31-2 coming out of the bye week because he gets that extra week to prepare. And maybe it is only 3 extra days, but when you think about whether it's Denver or OKC, if this does go to 7 games, they're going to be tired and exhausted, just like Golden State was coming out of their first round. But then also the Wolves being able to prepare mentally, watch so much more film, and regardless of their opponent, just kind of feel like mentally, confidence-wise, they're one step ahead of, kind of their blueprint and their game plan, how they want to attack, how they want to defend, and things like that, too. We can talk about that a little bit more in segment 3. If this team was a stock on Wall Street right now, 8-2, in the playoffs, right? Actually, second best record, I believe, tied for first best record since March with OKC. Remember, they were 17-17, Jack. And then, okay, Julius got healthy, DDV got healthy. You got to see all these guys finally on the court at once at the same time, and it started to click. The chemistry, the cohesion, it all started to click and develop. They are, again, one of the hottest teams since March. I think, again, tied with OKC. Don't quote me on that. But if this team was a stock right now on Wall Street, what's it worth right now sitting here today going back to the Western Conference Finals in back-to-back years?
Yeah, I think all the analysts are certainly upgrading it from a hold to a buy, I think, because, I mean, honestly, the other part of it too, and we were having this conversation before the game with some of the media members too, is that, look, like, the Western Conference, just the NBA in general, it's so difficult to build a team that is really sustainable now in this new second apron, new CBA version of the NBA. But I talked about it in the last show, that the Wolves have a very real chance of being able to bring 7 of their 8 top guys back, and then also bring, you have into the fold guys like TJ Shannon and Jalen Clark and Rob Dillingham, a first round pick in this coming draft, the first overall second round pick in the draft this coming year, which is also a really valuable pick. So there's a lot that this Timberwolves team has to play with. And I talked about it. I'm generally not one for victory lapping, but I loved the trade when it happened. I remember vehemently saying that it was great for financial purposes more than anything else, because now this Timberwolves team was going to be in a spot to be able to build sustainably.
Have that window, have that 2, 3, 4 year window, right? Not just a one and done all in, push your chips in.
At least, because Anthony Edwards is extended. Jaden McDaniels is extended. Rudy Gobert has signed his extension. You have Rob Dillingham, TJ Shannon, Jalen Clark, all on rookie contracts, right? Julius Randle, you're in a good spot with Julius Randle, where I think he could opt in and extend, do something similar to what Rudy did, knowing that if he's going to play at this level here, it's probably a higher level of play than he's going to produce anywhere else. And I know that his family loves it here. So I think, those are some things you got to take into consideration there. And then there's not many teams out there with cap space, Luke. So I just wonder if the Naz Reid contract isn't quite as high as what a lot of people are thinking that it's going to be. And because of that, they might be able to get him back at a number that allows them to have maybe $7-8 million to play with to fill out the final 2 roster spots with minimums and be under the second apron. So again, really, really good spot for the Timberwolves moving forward. And that's a huge part of this calculus as well, right? In that, not only are the vibes great because they're playing well and they're back in the Western Conference Finals, but I'm just saying they're in a much better spot than a lot of these other teams in the Western Conference, except maybe Oklahoma City, in terms of what they're going to be able to do,
future assets and yeah, for sure. No, that makes a lot of sense.
This is the Locked On Player of the Game.
All right, as always, I want to know your game MVP for the Wolves, but I also want to know the MVP for the Wolves for the entire series. And who knows, maybe it's the same guy for both questions, but lay it on us. Who was it and why tonight in Game 5? And then when you take a step back and look at the big picture, all 5 of these games, who was the Wolves' series MVP?
Yeah, Luke, it's the same guy for me, and it's Julius Randle. Julius Randle tonight, 29 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, did have 5 turnovers, but just the way that he has dominated inside the arc has been a spectacle. He was 11 of 12 from 2 in this game. He got whatever he wanted on the drive. He finished through people, and the Warriors had Draymond Green, who is arguably the greatest defensive player of all time. And he had nothing for Julius Randle the entire series. Jimmy Butler, who is a tremendous offensive player, but is up there with anyone in terms of his ability to go one-on-one with somebody, especially a bigger, burlier, more physical guy that isn't quite as quick as maybe someone like Ant is. And Jimmy Butler had nothing for him.
Yeah.
Julius Randle is the only guy I have ever seen go right at Nikola Jokic and say, you're baby food to me. I'm going to move you out of the way. A lot of people look at Nikola Jokic and say, hey, you might be baby food, but that's because I'm going to blow right by you. And Julius Randle said, I don't think that dude is strong enough for me. And he moves him out of the way and can score that way too. So I think just the way that he has kind of transformed his game from being someone that kind of maddeningly too often settled for mid-range jumpers and these tough, inefficient shots, has now become a much more efficient three-point shooter since he's returned from his injury, and been a guy that has now been able to get to the rim at will now that they've figured out a lot of the spacing stuff with him and Rudy Gobert in the front court. And then also has really gone to work in a meaningful way when they're in that spaced out lineup with Jaden and Nas beside him in the front court. So I think for what Julius Randle did as a guy for the second series in a row, to be able to provide that calm that the team really needed, I thought was super meaningful. Super meaningful. And the other part of it for me with Randle is that not only has it been, okay, I'm going to be that guy that calms everything down as a scorer, but it's, hey, if I'm the only guy that has it, now the defense is committing to me and I'm not going to force it. I'm going to get everyone else involved and make sure that we're creating a lot of really good shots. And that, I think, has been the most impactful part of his game in this postseason, because defenses have been having to commit more bodies to him. And I think at times, last season, Karl would struggle with being double teamed or seeing multiple bodies in the lane, and certainly was better than he was 2 years ago in the previous parts of his career. But the way that Julius Randle has been able to handle those situations and really create more advantageous situations in the half court setting, whether Ant's on or off the floor, I think has been something that has given this Timberwolves team kind of new life beside Anthony Edwards. And one thing that I want to point out too with Randle, and these numbers were coming into tonight, so I don't have them updated for tonight, but Ant had a 30% usage rate coming into this series. Anything above 30 is sky high. And Julius Randle was right behind him at 28. But with that usage rate, Ant had an assist to turnover ratio of about 1.6, which is fine. It's fine. But Randle was sitting there at 2.5, which is tremendous, especially for someone that's as high volume of a playmaker as he is, and has had to make plays in some tough spots where he's kind of jump stopping and seeing multiple bodies, or spinning and throwing these jump passes and consistently passing on the move too. I mean, and when Randle has been on the floor and Ant has been off the floor, I think he's catalyzed a ton of ball movement in those lineups, in those contexts. 71.5% of the Timberwolves scores when Randle is on the floor, Ant's off the floor, have been assisted. And if you extrapolated that for the entire postseason, that would lead the NBA, right? Indiana right now is number one in the league at about 69%. And in those minutes with Randle on the floor and Ant off the floor, the Wolves have had a 122 offensive rating. So to be able to play through Randle as a guy that not only can be the one that can go score when Ant's not out there, or when Ant doesn't have it going, or when Ant's kind of doing what he has done a lot this year, which is kind of feel out the defense in the first 5-6 minutes of the game. And then once Rudy goes off the floor, once Dante comes back in and gets a little bit more aggressive with some more spacing that's available to him, I think to be able to have a guy that they now, I asked Chris Finch before the game that he's referred to Ant constantly as a home run hitter, but how impactful has Julius been consistently hitting for singles and doubles and getting on base, so that when Ant kind of comes up in his spot in the order, whether it's that third quarter, that fourth quarter, and he really starts swinging for the fences, that then there's another guy there to be able to help him out too. And he basically said, that those two guys over the latter half of the season have really done a good job of being able to sense when the other guy has it going and when to kind of play through the other, but then at the same time, learn how to, I guess, get off the ball before it becomes too much of a good thing, right? And then help get the other guy involved into the game. And he said that they've improved so much of, learning how to utilize one another in a lot of those actions where they're both involved. And that's shown throughout the series. But I just think what Julius Randle has done to raise the floor of this team, and especially in moments when they haven't looked great and they've gotten a little emotionally haywire and are having tough stretches where they can't make a basket, I think just Randle's ability to go score on the inside and wear a team down physically on the interior is something that I think has been better than any Timberwolves fan could have possibly imagined coming into this season. And I think it's really hard for me to come up with an example of someone who has changed their public perception faster than Julius Randle has, especially at this point in his career, whether I don't know if it's like his 8th or 9th year in the league, but it's extremely rare that guys are able to remake themselves.
Yeah,
and
you kind of are who you are at this point, usually, typically.
Exactly. And he deserves a ton of credit for coming into a new situation, trusting a coach in Chris Finch who had a plan for him. And then when he got hurt, he didn't just kind of sit out and not do anything. I mean, he was sitting out and constantly thinking about and learning, how can I be better? How can I impact the game at a higher level? Where does this team need me most? And he came back. I mean, he's been amazing since he came back. So I think, he deserves so much credit, and I hope that he's here for a long, long time with the way that he's playing, because it truly does feel like it's sustainable given how repeatable it's been in super high leverage situations.
Yeah, to your point again, 17-17 this team stood at almost halfway through the regular season. And then once they got everybody, including Julius, on the floor together, healthy, it just started all clicking. Plenty more deep dive from this one. Biggest turning point in the series. I'll ask that, Jack. That's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by Monarch Money. You ever go check your bank account and go, where did my money go? Dining out, online shopping, entertainment. So easy to lose track of your money, isn't it? Well, that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your own personal CFO. Monarch Money gives you the visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, spending, all in one place. So you stop just managing your money, and instead you start finally building some wealth. I know when I started using Monarch Money, I realized how much money I was spending every month on streaming services, Max, Netflix, Apple TV, Disney Plus, Hulu, you name it, I had it. But now I budget smarter. I save more money than ever. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com. 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your entire first year.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
All right, Jack, you tell me, what was the biggest turning point in this one, kind of on the micro scale as far as just tonight goes, and then what was the biggest turning point in the macro when you look at the big picture at this entire series? Maybe it's just as easy as, when Steph Curry went down. I don't know, but you tell me, micro, macro, turning point series in the game tonight.
Yeah, for sure. I think tonight it was when Mike Conley took over the end of the second quarter. So Mike Conley at about the 5:39 mark got Julius Randle involved, had an opportunity to take a layup, but instead kicked it out for Julius Randle in the corner, and then he drove and scored out of the corner. And from there on in, the Timberwolves scored 19 points for the remainder of the quarter. And of the 20, so you count that Julius bucket plus the other 19. So of those 21 points, Mike Conley scored or assisted or made a pass that led to shooting foul for 18 of those 21 points. And that was easily the most impactful stretch that he's had of this playoffs. Mike had, I believe, 14 points in that first quarter, or 11 points in that, or excuse me, either 11 points or 14 points in that first half. And that was the most he's had in any half this playoff run. I think he had 8 such halves last season. So you could just tell that the Timberwolves needed to ride Mike Conley a little bit more last season than they have this season.
Yeah.
But he certainly stepped up when it mattered most. And I think it was, an interesting point too, because Chris Finch made a rotation change in this game that we haven't seen from him in this series for the first time. Mike Conley has started the second quarter of all these playoff games. And tonight, because Dante DiVincenzo played such a strong first quarter, especially on the defensive end, Chris Finch left him out there to start the second quarter. And so Dante normally checks out at the end of the first quarter and then comes back in to play the final 6 minutes of the second quarter. But he flipped Dante and Mike in those rotations tonight. And boy, did it pay off, because Dante was really good in the early part of that second quarter, flying around, creating turnovers, had an awesome kind of mini poster dunk off a steal. But Mike, I just thought totally settled everything down when the team needed it most. They were kind of hemorrhaging points at the other end of the floor when Jonathan Kuminga was just kind of going right at Naz Reid and having his way on the straight line drive. And the Wolves were kind of losing their head with some really simple defensive rotations that forced them into scrambles. And out of those scrambles, they did a really poor job of rebounding and created a lot of second chance opportunities for the Warriors. And so instead of letting the Warriors just kind of stack up points and and create some rhythm and take back a lead, maybe leading into halftime. Mike Conley just had none of it. And for him to make 2 threes, scored twice inside, and then had 2 or 3 assists was just super impactful. And I think just to talk about him and Dante for a moment, I mean, the Timberwolves in this series haven't gotten a whole lot on the offensive end from either one of them. And they've still been able to pull this out. And it just kind of goes to show of, when those guys are shooting it at a rate that we know that they can, this Timberwolves team is just so much more dangerous. I mean, those guys tonight were 6 of 10 from 3. And if you throw Ant in there as the team's 3 best shooters, they were 15 of 19 from 3 tonight. All those guys. And so, they're 11 of 19 from 3. So I just think that the Timberwolves have another level to unlock when their best catch and shoot guys all are making their catch and shoot threes. And I think they did a great job of moving the ball all night tonight. I think Ant also deserves a ton of credit here. He had a career high tying 12 assists in this game. He got doubled a lot, and he was more than willing to give up the ball. And then the guys behind him did a great job of moving the ball, making extra passes, passing up good shots for great shots. And that was why you're able to see so many open looks for guys like Dante and Mike, and then Ant eventually getting the ball back in some of those situations and knocking down his looks as well. So I think, this Timberwolves team in this next series is going to need a consistent third and fourth scorer. And I think Dante DiVincenzo is definitely capable of that. I think Jaden McDaniels is definitely capable of that. And those two guys tonight had 27 points combined, which is obviously a huge thing. And then Mike Conley added 16 of his own. So I think if you can for sure get one of Mike Conley or Dante DiVincenzo to have it from 3-point land, that's going to be super impactful against, whether it's the Nuggets, and it's a team that really, especially without Jokic on the floor, and it just at points even with Jokic on the floor, that their role guys have had a really tough time offensively. I think that can take them up another level offensively. But then with Oklahoma City, if they're going to sell out and throw 2 and 3 guys at Ant that are all super fast, super aggressive, super long, the guys behind him are going to have to play really well, especially when they do create open catch and shoot looks from 3. So I thought that was really important. But beyond that, Luke, I think as part of that turning point with Mike, the ball just moved so beautifully in those moments. And I think, not only did it create open 3-point opportunities too, but this Wolves team also sensed when it was the right time to pump and go. And in the first half of this game, the Timberwolves shot 14 of 16 at the rim. I know we've talked a lot in these playoffs about the Timberwolves' inability to finish at the rim, and a lot of looks that they were creating at the rim were really, really tough, contested looks. And for the Wolves to just move the defense around, the Warriors play a really tight shell and do a great job of kind of moving together on that shell while also maintaining, the right space on the floor to be in for rebounds. And so for the Wolves to be able to kind of break that shell with their ball movement. And then when the Warriors went to a 3-2 zone, I thought they were really good about screening different parts of the zone to create driving lanes and then kick out situations from there, and played really well off the catch like they have for the majority of the playoffs. So everything was working really, really well. And I think, again, for Ant to just be willing to make the right play more often than not, end up with 12 assists tonight and not feel like he needed to force it. I think Ant last season or 2 seasons ago for sure would have felt like he needed to force it. But for Ant to have 22 points on 15 shots is just fine. I think, he'd surely like to have less than 7 assists, but less than 7 turnovers. But 12 assists, I think, makes up for it a little bit. So, all in all, it was a really good night from a Timberwolves offensive perspective. But again, a lot of that has to do with the flow that Mike Conley created in the later part of that second quarter that just kind of carried them through and sustained them for the rest of the game.
I don't want to branch off too far here. I know we got to get over to segment 3, but I just wanted to ask you talk about so much about Mike Conley. I wanted to ask you about Rudy Gobert's role in the playoffs thus far. I've wanted to ask you this for a while, but probably not, what he maybe envisioned the ideal blueprint for him individual maybe is, the minutes, the rotations, all that, but the impact the guy has still had and been able to have, I guess, specifically tonight in Game 5. Another Game 5 makes me think back to the Lakers Game 5 matchup as well, when teams decided to blitz Ant, to your point, double team him. Rudy's been the guy to be able to take advantage, make those teams pay, and kind of feast on the inside.
Yeah, no question about it. And I think for Rudy, a huge part of his maturation process as a player is kind of understanding, especially in a playoff setting, that certain matchups or certain series may not always be the best for him.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
for him to be able to keep his head and still make play after play after play on the defensive end of the floor and not get discouraged in moments where the offense might be sputtering for reasons outside of his control, but trusting that Chris Finch takes him out of the game just to get a little bit more spacing, play with a little bit more pace, because even, for all of Rudy's great things, he does drag the pace of a team down pretty considerably on the offensive end of the floor. And he's totally trusted in that and just played his role wonderfully in this series and really throughout the entire playoff run for my money. And I think for Rudy, Nikhil was asked about this, and Dane Moore tweeted this out, and I don't have the full quote in front of me, but the long and the short of what Nikhil said was that Rudy always has winning at the forefront of his mind, and that he doesn't let his role or minutes get in the way, and that he just continues to compete at a really high level, and that Rudy does get pissed when he gets taken out of the game because he's a competitor, but then he also understands why it's happening. And then when he does get back on the floor, he goes out and does exactly what the Timberwolves coaching staff is asking of him, right? And so I think for tonight, the Warriors doubled Ant a lot more than they have in this series above the break. And so Rudy was, willing and ready to play in the middle of the floor and did a great job of finishing when his number was called. He drew fouls a few times, finished some lobs, and all just, I thought his spacing was really good and did a great job of positioning himself on the floor where his teammates could find him, especially further away from the play. So he'd set himself up on the weak side more often than not. That's what we saw in that game 5 of the Lakers series where he had 27 and 24. So I think for Rudy, it's just his ability to always just kind of lock in when the situation calls for it. I thought he was awesome in the half court tonight with him on the floor, played 28 minutes tonight. Golden State had a 98 offensive rating and shot just 13 of 27 from 2. And they only took 11 of their 30 free throw attempts while Rudy was on the floor. So in the 20 minutes Rudy sat, they took 19 of their 30 free throw attempts. They had a 127 offensive rating with Rudy off the floor, and they were 15 of 24 from 2. So significantly more efficient inside the arc. I just thought that he blew up so many possessions by keeping guys out of the paint and forcing them to just make meaningless passes around the perimeter that then resulted in guys having to do something with the ball at the last second of the shot clock. So, and then the last note on Rudy, I thought that Rudy did an excellent job of screening in the 3-2 zone that the Warriors played tonight. A lot of times you saw Rudy screening the top middle guy of that 3-2 zone. It would either be, he would be facing the basket if you wanted to create a dead-on three-point look, whether it be for Anthony Edwards or Mike Conley or Jaden McDaniels or Julius Randle at times, and then would screen, facing the sideline if you wanted to create a driving lane from someone. And I just think the timing of his screens are so smart. And I think you kind of forget about the impact of his screens because he so rarely gets called for illegal screens. But that's a huge factor on the offensive end of the floor that often goes a little bit forgotten about. So for Rudy to have 17 points on 8 of 9 shooting and was I think a team high plus 21 in his 27 minutes was just fantastic tonight. And I think was a wonderful summation of just how he impacts things and all the ways that you might not see. So hopefully he can carry that forward because he's been tremendous so far in this postseason.
Yeah. Again, another game 5 where he just comes through and kind of just seals the deal for this team. 27 and 24. Never going to forget that Laker performance in game 5 last series as well. Couple minutes left. I just want to ask you, Jack, what the Wolves got to clean up now, whoever they play in this Western Conference Finals coming up. That's all coming up, though, right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode also brought to us by BetterHelp. When your schedule, it gets packed, work projects, kids, whatever it may be, it's so easy to let your priorities start to slip, even when we know what makes us happy. But when you feel like you got no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy, they should become more important than ever. If you've been thinking about starting therapy, maybe it's time to give BetterHelp a try. Entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited for your schedule. It's so simple, too. All you got to do, you fill out a brief questionnaire, you get matched up with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Go visit BetterHelp.com/lockdown today. You're getting 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockdown. All right, so we kind of touched on Denver, OKC after Game 4 on the postcast. You made it clear you want Denver by a million, hands down, easy answer. But you tell me what the Wolves need to worry about when they look in the mirror. What do they need to fix? What do they need to focus on and get better at and clean up? The turnovers, offensive rebounding, maybe lack of putting some teams away in the fourth quarter. What is it? What worries you the most, I guess, when the Wolves really look in the mirror, regardless of their next opponent in the Western Conference Finals?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just control what they can control, right? I think this Timberwolves team all season long, including in the postseason, has had bouts of struggling to kind of stay locked in and play to the level of their opponent. And I think, with the Lakers, they did a much better job of it just because obviously there were no real injuries that kept guys out of games, and the Wolves just kind of knew it was in front of them. But with the Warriors, I thought at times that they really struggled to play to the level that they should play. And we saw it in stretches, but there were other points where they just kind of totally let the Warriors off the hook. And even though, yes, they did come out and they won these 4 games in a row, and that's the important thing, I think we could all agree that the Timberwolves did not play their best in a lot of these games. And so, when you look at tonight, Brandon Podziemski had 28 points, right? One shy of tying a career high for him. He'd had 30 points in the series coming into this. And then Jonathan Kuminga just constantly beat them on straight line drives, had 26 points. So for 2 guys like that to combine for, half the Warriors' points in this game, I think is something that they've got to clean up on. I think just some of the attention to detail with some of the role guys. I trust that the Wolves are going to have a really good plan, whether it's for Jokic and Murray or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But both of those teams have other guys that can really hurt you if you don't pay attention to the game plan and kind of focus in on some of those finer details in terms of having the right rotations and making sure that you're finding a body on cutouts and closing out possessions with rebounds, I think is the first thing overall. And then there were some times in this series where Anthony Edwards did a really poor job of dribbling into double teams. We talked about that in the last series as well. I think that's really the only thing that Ant needs to clean up. He picks up his dribble really far away from the basket at some points. That can be problematic in terms of the defense just getting more aggressive with him and it being tougher for him to find an outlet that he can pass the ball to. So that's something that is something that he can clean up for sure. And the Wolves bench guys between Dante and Nikhil also struggled with extended pressure beyond the arc. And the Oklahoma City Thunder are going to do that for 48 minutes. And they're going to see these Wolves and they're going to pick up full court and they're going to trap when they get beyond half court. And they're going to force the Wolves to dribble the ball cleanly and make sharp passes and do everything that you need to do offensively to beat a really aggressive defense and one that has a lot of different guys that can come in and play a lot of different roles on the perimeter. So I think if it is OKC, they're the way they handle the ball against pressure out above the break is going to have to be a lot better. They're going to have to pass the ball, with some zip on it and make sure that, they maintain the right spacing, because if they don't maintain the right spacing, this Oklahoma City team ball hawks like crazy, that they create turnovers at a rate better than just about anybody in the league, and they don't turn it over. They've had the lowest turnover rate in the league all season long. So they've been the best at both ends of that spectrum. And that's an area where this Timberwolves team, when they're not playing well, struggles in both of those areas. So that's one that's going to have to keep up. And then, like I said, with the defensive rebounding, that's something honestly that they've been really good in all year. Yeah, I know. And have just struggled in this series particularly. So, it may just be a matchup thing with the Warriors in terms of where they're able to crash from, especially from the corners. But yeah, I think that's something that will be really important for them. I think if they can not turn the ball over, I trust this Timberwolves defense to slow down any type of offense that's out there. So that's going to be probably number one for me.
Final parting thoughts before we get out here. Last 60 seconds. I'll give you it all. Empty the clip, notes, observations, takeaways, favorite moment tonight, favorite sequence in the series. What are you most excited about in the Western Finals? That matchup, is there a specific matchup, X's and O's you're kind of already intrigued about in the back of your mind? 60 seconds, lay it on us. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, the Timberwolves can, in fact, win without Jimmy Butler. That is what we learned in this series. They do not need him to win. But for me, yeah, I think a matchup that I'd really be looking forward to is Anthony Edwards versus a really nasty and tough defensive perimeter from the Oklahoma City Thunder. I just think that so much of the talk has been about SGA as potential MVP. I think that would be a pretty poor MVP decision for my money. I think Nikola Jokic should be a five-time consecutive MVP now. I thought the Embiid MVP was a joke, but I just think seeing those two guys going shot for shot in a playoff setting, potentially for 7 games, would be awesome, because they play this. They're both so dang good, but they play the game in such different ways, and just delight fans in different ways. And I think to see those two go head to head is kind of who's the young star out in the West that people kind of look to as the torchbearer for, hey, we got to go through that guy. And that would be really fun. So
who gets to wear the crown? Who gets to wear the crown for the offseason? Yeah.
So I think that would be really fun. And then I think also too, just the Timberwolves offense is trying to manufacture advantages against that defense, and who Julius Randle would be going up against, I think would be pretty fun. But either way, I think it'll be another really good opportunity for Julius Randle. And boy, I just could not be happier for the guy. I know everybody in that locker room loves him, and he's been a godsend for this team. And it's pretty crazy that we may end up with the Knicks and the Wolves both in the respective conference finals of what is right now shaking out to be as much of a win-win trade as we've had in quite some time in the NBA.
Not just the NBA, Jack, all of sports. You just don't see it a lot. It's just so usually lopsided for so many reasons. Teams, organizations just have to move on for whatever it may be, and on the field, off the field, whatever it may be. You cannot write it. You cannot script it any better than what has unfolded up to this point. We got to get out of here. T-Wolves put that final nail in Golden State coffin. Game 5, 121-110. That's your final. 8-2 now in the playoffs thus far. They now await the winner, of course, of OKC, Denver. Obviously, we'll all keep our eyes on that series as well. As always, huge shout out to all you guys, all the everydayers out there that always make us your first listen. All you guys coming in the chat with us from game to game. Make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already. We're so close to 10,000 subscribers, so that's much appreciated. And please go follow Jack as well at GRBorman13, live from the Target Center throughout the entire playoffs. Will you be purchasing your Delta flight for OKC or Denver if that's how it goes down? You've already made the trip to LA. You've made the trip to the Bay. You got one more left in you? You got one more left in the books?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. All right. I don't want to put you on the spot here.
We'll have to see. So okay. I can't go to Denver, unfortunately, because of some health reasons. But
got it. Sure.
With the altitude. But if it's OKC, there's a chance. There's a chance that I may be down there. I'm not quite sure yet. We'll see.
Maybe just another reason for me to root for OKC now at this point. I don't know. We'll see. We'll catch you for Game 1 Western Conference Finals right here. Same time, same place. Until then, signing off.